we're in business. So should we start again then? Probably? I beg your pardon? No one start. Okay, we'll just start at the beginning and make sure we get all of the news out. So the first thing I've commented on is that I'm really happy to see that we're able to meet in person, and I commented also that bear with us as we work through new technology. So we're over our first hurdle and we're moving ahead. There are pens on everyone's desk that are from the warden who annually visits with the CAO, and typically those to be handed out in person, but we had our update meeting in July, so the warden has asked that those be distributed to you, and regrets not being able to be here in person to do that. The other item that I wanted to mention is that Middlesex Centre staff and council have a history of working together and participating in and supporting various charities and community organizations. And I wanted to mention two of which are having important events this weekend. First, the Middlesex Elgin VON is holding its 2020 VON Great Community Run, Walk and Roll on Sunday, September 13th between 9 and 12, and that's happening in Lions Park in Mount Bridges. There are details online about the new format. If you'd like to take part or attend, check out the Elgin Middlesex Elgin VON website, and all the information is there. The second event that's being held this weekend is Across Canada One, the Ovarian Cancer Canada's annual Canada Walk of Hope, brackets the virtual edition, is happening on Sunday the 13th as well. And like many other events, it's looking different this year, but you can walk virtually, or if you'd like to support a person who is walking already, has committed to fundraising for the event. It's near and dear to our CAO's heart, and it's an important event for fundraising for that organization. So I'd encourage you to check the Ovarian Cancer Wealth page or speak with him about details. So that's it for announcements. The first item that we have to deal with is any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Are there? Seeing none, then we have a number of delegations today. The first delegate is Laura Murphy, who's going to speak to us about keeping chickens in residential areas. There she is. Good morning, Laura.
Hi, we're all adjusting to technology. Thank you.
Oh, there, I think I heard you. Are you there?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, why don't you give us your presentation then, and we'll get started. Oh, before you start, I should acknowledge that we did receive a number of correspondence items, and these were distributed to council. So we've had a chance to read those, including the one that came this morning.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you also ahead of time for your time, because I realized during this crazy world we're in that this may seem like an insignificant little issue, but I assure you that for my family as well as several others, it's not insignificant. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my little story. We moved out to Middlesex Centre about 8 years ago when our daughter was born, and a lot of little things went into that choice, and one of them was we wanted some experience for her that was outside the city. We're surrounded here in Melrose by agriculture, and we have a large yard. And let me tell you, when COVID hit, I thanked my lucky stars every day that we had a large property for my 3 kids to run and play and burn some energy, because we were all stuck at home, of course. On top of that, it provided a lot of learning opportunities that they weren't getting obviously at school, to watch our wheat field grow that's behind us. We were picking a lot of things up that we really had to have some learning opportunities that you have to start getting creative when we're all in quarantine here. So we actually are so grateful that we live in this community, and it was tenfold when we were all going through this pandemic. So on top of that, we really encouraged our kids to learn more about sustainability. We're stuck at home. We are learning how our food chain works. I was trying to pick up the school curriculum and run with it as best as I can, but certainly I am not a teacher. So that's just sort of my COVID pitch. But on top of that, I do think that it's important for kids who are so in front of these Zoom screens as we are right now, and in front of and consumed by a lot of other media outlets and technology, that we really wanted for our family to step back and learn more about a natural lifestyle. We preached to them about healthy living, sustainability, life cycles, all of those things, because we get caught up in our fast world. So upon the schools shutting down, me trying to be the mom that I am, our teacher was so wonderful. She was actually hatching some chicken eggs in the classroom to teach about the life cycle in the egg, how that all works, and then she was going to hatch them and return them back to a farmer. Well, my daughter, coming home from COVID, she was not upset about school closing. She was worried about these chicken eggs that were in her classroom. So I brought them home. I put them on our kitchen counter in an incubator. And our homeschool was to journal every day the growth and development of these chicks that were in the eggs. And we spent hours staring into a window of an incubator every day until these little babies were born. And it was honestly the best experience that I've ever seen for my children. It inspired us to really want to do more. We planted a massive vegetable garden, as well as several other people in our hamlet zone. I think that the people that live in Melrose, Poplar Hill, Lobo, Coldstream, etc., we're just so lucky. We get a little bit of a taste of farm life, but we don't have the super hard commitment and obviously lifestyle and career choices of a full-fledged farmer. But we really want to do our best to, be a part of that lifestyle and then learn about it and engage in it. And so that's what we're doing in our household. And to be honest, I was really saddened and disappointed to hear that having a few hens in our yards of our size is something that isn't considered part of our bylaws, because I think that we have huge yards. There are several communities and municipalities surrounding us that before COVID are allowing this opportunity for people. You can have your veggie garden, you can have a couple of hens to have fresh free range eggs. In my family alone, I will guarantee you that my two dogs, who are considered pets, obviously, are much more annoying to my neighbors, to myself, to everybody than a couple of hens would be. I did grow up with a farming background, so I'm aware that they're quiet, especially hens. Obviously, I don't think that roosters are a good option for a residential type area, but I do think that having a few hens, keeping them clean and quiet and providing for a family really has no effect on abutting neighbors. And I just think it's a great opportunity. It teaches responsibility, it teaches accountability, it teaches sustainability, especially during this difficult time. In our family, we've chosen to homeschool our kids this year to figure out sort of what's going on with COVID. We have a lot of high-risk people in our family, and I think it's a great learning opportunity for people that have made the choice to move out into these hamlet communities. On the contrary, I do believe that there should be some restrictions. I'm not blind to see that. I know that if I was in a medium residential or more highly populated area, I don't know if it's a good option for them. I don't think that it would be easy for staff, not council, but for staff to monitor issues that could be going on because the yards are so much smaller. But us out here, I think that most people in my community that I've spoken to about this issue, they were shocked, to be honest, that it's not allowed within our bylaws. They are super supportive, as you could see by the letters that were sent in. And I was really impressed by the different reasons why. Some people really, they supported the opportunity because they were teaching about organic, free range, having chickens not in cages, things like that. that's important to their family. For other people, it's just a good learning opportunity. For other people, they're pets. My daughter is teaching a chicken how to respond for treats. So for sunflower seeds, this chicken is able to do funny tricks. They really are pets for people, and I don't think that we're here to have a poultry operation or for profit or anything like that. We are looking to teach our families, live a little bit of the country lifestyle, and that was really one of our main reasons to move out to this type of a hamlet zone. And really, that's my biggest point of all. I don't have a lot of facts. I don't have a lot of, you know, reasons why. I just think that if we are all out surrounded by agriculture, having this ask to have a few hens to help support our families, teach responsibility, sustainability, and at the end of the day, I don't see that how it affects any of the neighbors when we all live in these beautiful, large community settings. But again, council, like I realize that there will be people that don't like it. I realize that there should be guidelines that need to be followed. For us, like for a small operation where we would have like one chicken per family member to provide eggs in the morning, it would be hamster shavings that we use in the bottom of our coop that you scoop out every day, just like you do a cat litter or other pets that you have to keep care of. So I don't really see it as a livestock issue, as a poultry issue. It's providing an extra pet on the list of pets. And I just really believe that, especially during this time, we're all getting a massive eye-opening where we need to be looking after our families. We need to be teaching them at home. We need to be learning about how the world works outside of constant 8-hour Zoom meetings and computer screens. We're trying to keep them outside and teach them how to be responsible human beings. So I realize that this is not a super detailed presentation, but I do really believe that you should consider amending this bylaw because I think it's a huge opportunity for people that live in communities and chose to leave the city for that reason.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I'll ask if there are any councillors who have questions or want any clarification on content presented in the presentation. Councillor Shipley.
Through the mayor to Laura, I just wondered why you opted to put your chicken coop beside the fence as opposed to the back of your yard, which I believe backs onto a farm field. Just wondering why you opted to put it right there.
Sure, of course. So we have several, I haven't measured it to be perfectly transparent, but our fence line is unique for our family in particular. Part of it is wooden and the remaining of it is wrought iron. So in fact, we hid it behind the wooden area of our fence purely in case our neighbors were not interested in seeing our chickens and thought we were kind of making a smart decision in that regard. Additionally, it's beside our vegetable garden where we are growing a huge substantial garden this year compared to other years for obvious reasons. And we can use that for fertilizer purposes. We're near water. We're able to keep the coop much cleaner. I am a pretty obsessive compulsive cleaner myself, and we are out there scrubbing the coop 2 or 3 times a week. So being closer to access to our water line was our big thing. The other one was hiding it behind the wooden fence rather than beside the wrought iron fence where our neighbors would be able to view it.
Okay, that's what Councillor Silva has a question.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Laura, just a quick question. You said you have a farming background, and I know that one of the big problems that can come about is people not taking care of the waste left behind by the chickens. Can you just talk a little bit about how you've been trying to maintain the coop and make sure that everything's clean?
Absolutely. So our coop is less than 6 by 6. It's actually an old, for anyone that has a Costco membership, it's the like little wooden playhouse that you can buy for kids. So it's a tiny little structure, and then off of the side we have a run, I guess you could call it, where they can go outside and walk around in their run. But inside the coop, there is hamster shavings. There are 5 hens, and twice a week I go out with a shovel. I throw it in a garbage bag, if I'm able to, I can actually, within the run area, I have mulch and I have the diatomaceous earth and everything, and I work it into the ground, and it's actually really amazing fertilizer. So the stuff from the coop is in the shavings, similar to how you'd clean a hamster cage. There's not a lot. There's only 5 hens, so it's not a substantial amount. And I just clean that out, put it in a trash bag, and we dispose of it properly. But out in the coop, as I said, or in the run area, we work it into the ground with mulch, and it gets decomposed.
Okay, thank you for those. Any additional questions? Seeing none, then we have a resolution before us, but I'm going to ask that the clerk walks us through the resolution process for moving this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the chair, the motion before you now is just to receive the presentation. That's the motion to acknowledge that presentation for us.
I'm so sorry, we can't hear.
The motion on the agenda is to receive the recommendation from Ms. Murphy. If council would like for staff to report back and look into exploring this further, we'll need a motion, and we'll take that as a direction to report back on a later date. So in terms of procedural process, recommend that we have a motion if there's appetite to explore this further. If there isn't, then the motion is just to receive the presentation and no further action.
Okay, thank you for the clarifications. And the motion before us is that the presentation by Ms. Laura Murphy regarding a request to change zoning bylaw to permit backyard chickens be received. Is there a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Scott. Okay, so we can do that first then, if you like. The motion would be to direct staff to prepare a report and report the information back at a future date. So we have a mover, Councillor Silva. Is there a seconder? Seeing none, that is declined. Then the motion is to receive. And we have Deputy Mayor Brennan and Councillor Scott. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Is Laura still there?
I am, yes. Sorry, I can barely hear.
Oh, sorry. So the motion to receive was accepted, and there was a motion prior that was moved for the request to have a report and then report back to council with the findings. That was not seconded, and the motion was received.
Okay, so can you summarize that in English, Laura language? I'm so sorry.
We had 2 choices to make. The first one was to receive the report. We actually did that second, but there was a motion to direct staff to go out and research, prepare a report, and come back to council with a recommendation down the road. There wasn't a seconder, so the motion is not carried. And then we received the content that you presented today for the record. Oh, and do you want to clarify?
Through the chair, staff will follow up after today's meeting with you, Ms. Murphy, so we'll outline what happened today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation and your time then, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another delegation now from the fire chief, and he's going to be visible in a minute. we're just there we go.
There we go. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Good to see you, gentlemen. You can go ahead and present your report, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to council. As you are aware, we back in 2019, I'll just get this started here. My apologies. As you're aware, back in 2019, the County of Middlesex, who used to do our inspection and investigation program, ceased that in 2019 of June. As council recalls, I came to you with a business case to provide these services on our own for Middlesex Center and subsequently for North Middlesex in September of 19, and then Thames Center in April of 2020. So we're going to do this quick presentation with a Q&A after, but the topics are what you see on the screen. We're going to go through a little bit of the legislation, why we require this, some safety inspections, some investigation information and public education, and then our records management. So, so this is a shared service, as you know. There are cost savings for all. It's on a per use basis with supplies ongoing divided by the 3 municipalities. So the services we provide to the municipalities are inspections, investigations, some components of public education, and inspections by routine request and complaint, investigations, which we follow the Fire Marshal Ontario's criteria, and we do light public education through this program. The fire service, as you know, is very heavily legislated and with subsequent regulations. So the one that our Bible is the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, which we just call the FPPA. And it does state that every municipality shall engage public education with certain components of prevention and inspections. So this is where it comes from. With that, the fire marshal appoints the fire chief and the inspectors, assistant to the fire marshal status. This gives us the ability to basically do these things under the act. The fire marshal, training-wise, the fire marshal strongly supports industry standards, which pretty much all of the fire service has gone to just for that defensibility and certification when proceeding to prosecution and through Provincial Offences Act, we have that background. So in order to do these inspections in a perfect world, the fire inspector must have these industry standards.
Colin, I'm just jumping in. We can't see your screen.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Oh my. Okay, my apologies, guys. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. It's the little black screen and then the diagram.
Okay.
Great. So if we can blow up your screen, that would be great.
All right, sorry.
Good.
Planned this to happen. I'm just going to run through this really quick. So again, like I said, the program ceased with the county in June of 2019, and we brought on North Middlesex and Thames Center. So these are the things that I've been speaking about, illustrated in the PowerPoint presentation.
So the FPPA, the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, for the last decade has put a lot of focus on recognizing the importance of the 3 lines of defense. So rather than just showing up and putting fires out, having a strong public education and fire safety standards and enforcement all work together in preventing fires and keeping the community safe. So during inspections, the focus is on 7 principles of life safety. These principles all work together in ensuring buildings are safe in the event of a fire emergency. So their buildings are built under the building code with these safety principles in mind. And the fire code is essentially a maintenance document that ensures where these principles are in place, that they're working and they're maintained, and that in the event of an emergency, that the safety to life is risk is minimized. So these are some examples of violations that are found during inspections. So fire alarm and detection systems must be maintained and working at all times. If they're not functioning as intended, that the occupants of the building lack an early notification that allows them to escape in a timely manner in an emergency. Buildings such as apartments and multi-unit residentials, different units are constructed as compartments, and there's fire separations that keep them separated from one another. So if a fire starts in one compartment, it should stay in that compartment for enough time to allow everyone else to escape. Fire protection equipment such as commercial cooking systems where there's kitchens, the grease vapors that are produced while cooking things such as bacon and grilling burgers is extremely flammable, and the systems must be maintained to reduce the risk of fire in these types of establishments. This one is very common, fire exits being chained or blocked or locked. So another component of doing inspections is identifying hazards that may impede the work of responding firefighters if they show up during an emergency. So when these are discovered, then the information is passed along to the suppression crews so they're aware of them if they ever respond to these locations. So we've developed an inspection cycle for the municipalities within the program, and we've assessed the different properties based on levels of risk. And a lot of the fire service across Ontario just goes out and tries to inspect all the buildings once a year, but that's not the best use of resources. Going to a max milk once a year, there's pretty low risk there. So rather than using up all the resources, the lower risk places like those we're going to go to every 3 years. And this is all based off an industry standard, NFPA 1730. So this is the table that we've put together for Middlesex Center, and this shows an approximate number of businesses that will require a yearly inspection, and the lower risk ones requiring an inspection every 2 years, and then even lower risk requiring an inspection every 3 years. So the goal within the first year is to get out and inspect all the properties and establish a baseline and develop a building inspection file for each property with contact information and kind of understanding where businesses have had changes of use and the risk levels have changed. And then in subsequent years, the number of inspections a year will cycle through as you work your way through the different risk levels. So complaint and request inspections, they can come from occupants of buildings, it can come from the general public. Complaints can come from responding firefighters when they see a fire safety issue, and then an inspection is done to follow up and ensure that the issue is remedied. Requests can come from new business owners, from regulated industries such as retirement homes and daycare centers that require an inspection from the fire department every year. So we've created these online complaint and request forms, and they're available through our municipal website and through the municipal websites of the other municipalities in our program. And it's an easy way for people to request an inspection or submit a complaint, and it gets all the appropriate information in there.
All right, so we also do investigations. So again, the training for this is an industry standard, and it is it is highly recommended. So under the OFM directive, as per the FPPA, it's not necessarily the municipality's direct responsibility to investigate investigations. However, the fire marshal has basically divvied this down to the municipalities to complete and provide that information back to them for holding in the metrics and planning, long-term planning. So these are basically the times when we contact the fire marshal. So they've over the years they've changed. To this point, they're more major events that would concern that would have large public interest or could potentially involve large loss of life. So some of those are clandestine drug operations, unusual origin and circumstance of the fire or movement of the fire, or injury or death.
So the public education component, a lot of it is taken care of during inspections. Property owners, business owners are responsible for knowing the laws, but a lot of times there can be confusion. So a large component of doing inspections is just educating the business owners and operators what's required and explaining why. So the other types of public education we provide is things like small extinguisher training sessions as requested, fire safety talks with church groups or group homes, and attending firefighter smoke and CO door-to-door programs is required. So we're currently in the process of implementing a new records management software, and this is going to allow for transparency for the prevention side of things for the other municipalities. All the files and information pertaining to the inspections, investigations, and public education will be accessible from any device through a login provided to the municipality and the fire chief. And it allows them to view a list of properties and addresses where inspections have taken place.
All right, that's our presentation. I am more than happy to take any questions from council at this point.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'll ask the questions from councilors. Deputy Mayor Brennan.
To you, Madam Mayor, to the fire chief. A few years back, they in single-family dwellings, I know a lot of the construction of floor joists and that they were glued together, which creates a problem. They don't have to burn through; they simply melt and collapse. Is that same construction allowed in multi-family units like townhouses and apartment buildings or anything like that? Is that same construction allowed under those building types?
Through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Brennan, that would really be more of a building code question based on that initial construction. And maybe Arnie would want to jump in a little bit on this, but there are certain requirements for construction based on the height of the building and the number of stories. But you are correct, like the new engineered beams, they do fail very quickly. And in some cases it's less than 10 minutes and even less with direct exposure to fire. So there are construction requirements, but I'll let Arnie come in on that one a little more.
Arnie, do you want to take a stab at providing some clarification there? Here you are. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, Council. Deputy Mayor, I guess your question was about the safety of wood construction and number of stories. If I maybe a clarification again.
Yeah, just concerned that we're seeing more townhouses, and we've had a lot of talk about apartment buildings in the single family dwellings with the floor joists and that just being glued together. They, as the fire chief just indicated, they collapse very quickly in under 10 minutes. Are the multi-unit residential stuff like townhouses and apartments, do they have a different standard in their construction?
Through the mayor, generally, no, they don't. Depending on the size of the building and the number of units, there are fire separations required between the units, but the floor joists, say in an unfinished basement, can span similar than they can that they can in a standard single family house. They don't need to be finished on the underside in an unfinished basement. And generally you can build townhouses in a continuous row with a standard fire separation between each.
Thank you.
Other questions? I've got a couple for you, Chief. I wanted to ask, I think I read in the presentation that if people are installing something in hallways, I think it was IT cabling and that kind of thing, there are holes in walls that can compromise, I guess, the original safety of the structure because of smoke being able to travel through those holes that are made for retrofits of different things. Is this something that you work together with Arnie and building officials, or do installations by IT companies or telephone companies, that kind of thing? Does that happen just without, I don't know, consultation with you? I was sort of confused about overlaps and making sure that public safety is maintained when other, I guess, vendors and service providers get involved in buildings. Do you have any clarification on that?
For sure. So like Arnie mentioned about fire separations, so in certain requirements, there are those fitted systems in place. If there are penetrations between those fire separations, they are required to be, for lack of a better word, filled and maintain that, say, for example, that 30-minute fire resistance rating. And as per the building code, there are conduits and raceways, and they have to be, when they penetrate those separations, they have to be in certain conduiting to keep that environment, if it were there, from transmitting from or extending from one area to another.
Okay, so actually this happens before the building's occupied, then you catch that kind of thing in inspections through like final inspections when the building is designated as habitable, that kind of thing. So it's not a situation where someone's retrofitting or installing new stuff and then you don't know about it.
Again, I'll throw that to Arnie. That's building code, but I believe you are correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want me to speak to that as well, Mayor?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little confused because I thought somebody's doing I guess you have no way of knowing if people are doing certain things. So I would have thought if a Bell guy's going in to do lots of cabling, or if there's IT cable being installed in the building or a nursing home or something, you should know about this so that the fire people can know about it. But I guess you don't always, or I'm just a little confused about the requirement of people who are potentially making issues for safety and how you work with those people to make sure that, in fact.
Yeah, that is correct. So fire stopping is what Colin's referring to, and it is mandatory in the building code, and we do see fire stopping before things are covered up, before ceilings are put up. There quite often there's channels or raceways above suspended ceilings or above drywall ceilings. That certainly is always a concern, though. People doing renovations without building inspection and without fire prevention's knowledge. So certainly there's value to our inspections for fire prevention if we do see newly installed channels or raceways between one unit and the next, where a property owner decided to put in that cable line or something between a number of units without putting in the right fire stopping. So they should always consider building permit needs, and also fire prevention should keep an eye for those situations when they're doing their inspections.
Well, one thing to just add in there, Mayor, it needs to be understood that single family homes are not directly covered under the fire code. So what I mean by that is we don't consider a single family home from a fire perspective as an inspectable property. So we will get to a single family home if there's a complaint or a concern or questions. We will go in, but primarily single family homes are not really governed under the fire code under any part or section.
Yeah, agreed. And fire stopping in the building code is limited to that as well.
Okay, I think I get it now. I was actually more worried about things like nursing homes or something like that, where we have lots of people who might be vulnerable. But you check those every year anyway, so thank you for that. My other question had to do with, you've done a presentation for us and updated us on all of this. Are you going to be working with our partner municipalities then and doing the same presentation to let them know your work?
Sorry, Mayor, I lost you at the last part of that question.
I'm asking, are you going to be communicating with the councils of other communities that we're providing services to with regard to your progress on this project and the work that you're doing?
Absolutely, that is correct. So we are attending North Middlesex Council on the 16th of September, and Thames Center is still to be determined, and we're going to provide them the same presentation with screen sharing this time. But I do believe North Middlesex, we are going to attend in person. They are doing that. So yeah, we definitely are keeping them apprised along the way for sure.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for the presentation and all the progress you've made on this project. I think it's important work, and we appreciate your update. So the resolution for us is that the presentation by Fire Chief Colin Toth and the Fire Prevention Officer Ryan Iswell regarding overview of fire prevention program be received. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Shipley and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Moving on to the next presentation, this will, Eric Chaudry, who's the manager of water and wastewater, is going to be updating us on, oh, there you are. Good morning.
Good morning.
You can get started if you like. I guess we should pull up your, there it is. Report. One moment, please. There we go. We can see your presentation.
Trying to expand it here. Just bear with me. Okay. Through you, Mayor, thank you for having me and Council. Today, I'm just going to walk you through the KOMOKA and Ilderton wastewater treatment facilities and facility flows and the loading profiles. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to touch upon the history of the Ilderton and KOMOKA wastewater treatment plants. I'm going to define wastewater treatment for you and where the sources of the wastewater come from. We're going to look at the loading rates at the facilities, wastewater strength, and then we're going to look specifically at the Ilderton wastewater treatment plant and the KOMOKA waste plant with regards to their current flow status, their per capita flow, as well as the quality of the raw sewage that's coming in. And then the next steps that we're going to take in the future for having sustainable wastewater treatment facilities in these settlement areas. So a little bit of history on the facility. So the Ilderton facility, prior to the 1990s, the entire town was on a septic system and leaching beds. And then in 1993, facilities were constructed and commissioned in 1994. And then moving up to 2004, the facility was expanded at that point. And then it had further expansions as well and re-ratings in 2007 and 2011. And currently right now, we're at a current flow capacity at the facility of about, or rated capacity facility at the facility right now of about 1,300 cubic meters per day. Currently at the Ilderton wastewater treatment plant, we have a wastewater EA that's open, and the EA is an environmental assessment, and it allows us to expand the facility if required, and also lays out some alternatives for expansion at the facility too. So starting in 2018, we did another construction project at the facility, and we constructed a new headworks and a new equalization tank. And that got us to our current capacity of 1,300 cubic meters per day. So in the environmental assessment, the phase 2, which we're looking at closely, is re-rating the facility by adding on to the treatment capabilities of the facility and increasing the capacity there up to about 1,800 cubic meters per day or more to allow for sustainable development and within the community of it. So moving over to the KOMOKA facility, back in 2009, an environmental assessment was done, and that looked at the capability of the facility for 20 years. And then in 2011, the facility was reconstructed and upgraded to its current capacity of 22,250 cubic meters per day. We're currently running at that capacity, as well as receiving the flow from the Kilworth settlement as well. So in October of 2019, the Kilworth wastewater treatment plant was decommissioned, and all the flow from that settlement area was pumped through a new pumping station down in Edgewater subdivision. So currently the EA environmental assessment document has expired at the KOMOKA facility, but we are still looking at some of the alternatives that were identified in that EA, such as expanding the headworks, as well as the administration buildings, and then if required, to allow for proper sustainable development within the community and the settlement area. We'll look at expanding the facility, obviously through a new EA process to the recommended number in the old EA of 3,500 cubic meters. That's just a brief history of what we were with our wastewater facilities and where we are now. Wastewater sources. So wastewater comes from spent water or used water from homes, businesses, industries, commercial activities, institutions, and they're conveyed to the treatment facilities through a series of engineered pipes as well as pumping stations within the communities. We can categorize the waste into domestic waste, so that's discharges primarily from residential dwelling. Industrial establishments or commercial, for example, that would be like the Foodland Plaza in KOMOKA. Institutional waste, that's generated from large institutional hospitals and education centers. We don't have those types of discharges to our facilities. And the Ilderton and KOMOKA facilities are primarily domestic wastewater. So domestic wastewater has its benefit. It's pretty consistent waste, and it's relatively easy to treat. So looking at the Ilderton wastewater facility, so as I mentioned earlier, we created a new headworks and pumping station, and the EQ tank as well. And those were put online in April of 2019. And these were developed and installed to gain capacity at the facility, as well as alleviate and shave off some of the peak flows that we were experiencing at the facility during wet weather events. As you can see here from the diagram or the graph I have, we can look at the average daily flow, which is the vertical blue line. The orange vertical line is the peak flow, daily flow. And then the blue horizontal line is the design flow. So the design at Ilderton is 1,300. On average, we're below our design flow, but you can see some of the peak events in some of the months are quite high. sometimes over 50% of our actual design facility of the facility. And these occur usually during wet weather events, and they're very quick, fast, and in and out of the facility or into the EQ tank, and then discharged back into the facility for further treatment over time. Currently, right now, as a percent of our annual flow, we are at about 71% of our capacity on average. So of that 1,300 cubic meters, we're treating approximately 930 cubic meters on average per day, or 71%. That only leaves us 29% hydraulic capacity. And this is why we're looking at 2021 at some further projects for future expansion at the facility. The raw sewage quality at the wastewater treatment plant in Ilderton. I've got a diagram or a chart here just showing the strength of the waste that comes into treatment facility on a monthly basis. You see BOD. BOD is biological oxygen demand, and that's a typical measurement of the amount of oxygen that's required to break down the organic waste that's in the wastewater. The higher the number, the stronger it is. Lower the number, the weaker it is. TSS is total solids. That's the amount of solids that are in the wastewater. PP is total phosphorus, and TKN is the total organic and ammonia, that organic nitrogen, sorry, and ammonia that are in the wastewater as a combination. And again, high numbers here are stronger wastes than lower. Typically at the Ilderton wastewater treatment plant, we're seeing about a medium strength waste. So we're able to treat it relatively effectively, but we don't have a lot of treatment issues there. It's more about the hydraulic capacity that we're dealing with there right now. And what I further have done is I've actually broken down the flows and the solids and the BOD, TKN, and total phosphorus on a per capita basis. So I've broken it down into each individual within the settlement and what's being contributed to the facility per capita, per person. So right now, per capita flow at the Ilderton facility, based upon the current populations we've used there and have, are about 317 liters per day. Typical guidelines are between 300 and 350, so we are getting a little elevated there. There are a couple items that we are investigating as to why and what could be going on there. And then also projects in the future to solve those issues going forward. And again, on total solids, BOD, TKN, and total phosphorus, we're below or around the typical design average of a facility. And that's pretty indicative of the type of waste we're seeing there, which is a relative medium strength waste. When we get into the KOMOKA facility, exact same data presentation as you've seen in the Ilderton. A little bit different here, obviously, because they're completely segregated facilities, treating completely different towns. Looking at the average flow, so back in October of last year, I mentioned that Kilworth came over to KOMOKA. So with that happening, you can see in October, came online in about October 21st. Sorry, Kilworth came offline October 21st. So you really see all the flow coming over to KOMOKA starting in November. And that put us up over about the 1,200 cubic meters per day on average. And so we don't see as many peak events at the KOMOKA facility, but we do. And right now we're actually running at about only 57% capacity So of the 2,250 cubic meters per day, we're only at about half of it, so about 1,200 cubic meters on average per day. Little bit different sampling program over at the KOMOKA wastewater facility. We're only required to grab our monthly raw sewage samples on a quarterly basis, so every 3 months. As you can see here, it's a little bit weaker. It's considered a weak waste here, based upon industry standards. And there could be a couple reasons for that. One could be demographics. Two could also be the sampling frequency of the wastewater. As you can see in the second quarter of 2020, we have a very low number there, which is not indicative of what's coming in. So that sort of skews the data a little bit. It's just inherent as to the way that ECA is written and the requirements that we have to sample for the raw sewage. And again, the total suspended solids, total phosphorus, and TKN are relatively weak concentrations as well. As we get into the KOMOKA wastewater per capita loadings, they're a little higher here, a little bit over on the per capita flow based upon the design guidelines. Right now we're at 375 liters per day. But again, lower on our other per capita loadings, such as total solids, BOD, TKN are lower or on par for the typical design guidelines that we see used by the Ministry of Environment. So having this information laid out, we're looking at further projects and identifying what needs to be done to have sustainable infrastructure as well as have sustainable development within the catchment area. So currently right now I have a couple capital projects ongoing at the KOMOKA facility. One is to look at the headworks and filter evaluations. These will allow us to change operationally inside the facility, as well as look at new technologies for possible improvements in the future. As I mentioned earlier, the EA, or the environmental assessment at the KOMOKA facility, expired. So we're going to investigate opening up or completing a new environmental assessment in the future to just ensure that we are ahead of the curve with regards to the amount of development we're seeing and having that latent capacity at the facility for that development to continue as we move forward. At the Ilderton wastewater treatment plant, another capital small project I'm doing this year is inflow and infiltration study in a subdivision area. That's going to be undertaken in the fall, and what that will do is it'll identify any areas that we see high inflow and infiltration, which will help us eventually gain back that lost capacity, either through inflow, overflow, land overflow, or any infiltration through breaks or anything within the collection system. And then we're also going to continue with the alternatives that were identified in the earlier environmental assessment and look at the possibility of facility expansion, again, to allow for that sustainable growth and development that's occurring within our settlement areas. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and it was just a brief overview for council as well as the mayor to understand exactly what's going on at the wastewater facilities. So at this point, if you have any questions, I'll be willing to answer any that you have.
Thank you for that presentation, Eric. I'll look to council then. Are there questions? Deputy Mayor Brennan.
You, Madam Mayor, to Eric. The Ilderton facility, when we did the last expansion, it was my understanding that that expansion would be able to handle timber walk and clear skies. Are you now indicating that that isn't the case, that that last expansion of that facility was not big enough to handle the current hamlet needs and building that's going on?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the expansion of the last expansion that just finished up in 2019 was the equalization tank. An equalization tank is designed specifically just to shave off the peak flows of the facility. It did get us a bit of capacity, but with the growth that we're seeing and with a projected lookout of 20 years, we're always looking to continue to increase the capacity at the facility to allow for future growth over that 20-year period. So we are able to handle it through the regular flows. We're looking intensively into where the inflow and infiltration is coming, or these drastic peak events that we see during the wet weather events. So I think if we were able to identify that and maybe get some projects in place to alleviate those massive peak swings that we see during wet weathers, we would actually inherit some of that capacity back that we have at the facility right now, hydraulically.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Huff.
Through the mayor to Eric. On that chart, it looks like Ilderton was over capacity 7 times in the past year. And I hear that you've said that you have to investigate that. But just what happens when we're over capacity? Like, where does all that raw sewage go?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The intent of the EQ tank is for that wastewater to actually end up in there. And then what we'll do is we'll slowly drain that material back into the facility for treatment. So it's not being discharged to the environment. Prior to that tank being put online around early 2019, prior to that, there was quite a few bypasses to the creek at the back of the facility. Since that EQ tank has been put online, there's been no bypasses reported. There was a small issue that occurred just as the tank was being commissioned, but nothing since the tank has been put online. So the material is maintained in the facility and further treated.
Are there other questions?
Can I have a follow-up?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Sorry.
I thought that was the thank you. I'm done. Go ahead.
Through the mayor to Eric. So basically, the sewage treatment plant really hasn't caught up to the development at this point in time. It's planning to, but right now it's not. I know you probably can't answer this, but like, should maybe development be slowed down, because this is an important piece of infrastructure, and if we're behind, and also costing wise, I'm assuming it's DCs that pay for this, or Septons, I would hope so, but or any other developer. Is that something that you might recommend, to just sort of slow down until such time as, because I think this happened once before in one of our first developments where capacity wasn't there, and they had to do private tanks or something for a few months until capacity was there.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll let Rob answer this question, I guess, the best he can.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So through Madam Mayor to Councillor Heffernan, the situation, I believe I know the one you're referring to, and that was a significantly different situation. That was more of a connection issue, not capacity downstream. The issue we have in Ilderton, I wouldn't say that we're behind. We're still falling within kind of the window of where we want to be operationally, other than the wet weather events, and there are a lot of plants that struggle with that. We have an active EA with the wastewater treatment facility in Ilderton. So within, I think it's good until 2025. So we'd be looking at completing the remainder of that expansion prior to that, and that falls in line with the development that's currently underway. The facility that's there right now, we've looked at some rough population projections based on the development for Clear Skies and Timberwalk, and assuming that was fully developed, we'd be probably pushing 100% capacity for that plant. But we're a ways away from having Clear Skies fully developed. So, the intent would be to have that next expansion online before we get to that point, and that's certainly feasible. Our intent is to move forward with design of an expansion next year, so that then we're ready for implementation of that, and potentially starting in 2022 or 2023, kind of as we see the need coming.
Clear? Okay, Councillor Harkes, you have a question.
Through your Madam Mayor to Eric, the one chart, what's Metcalf and Eden?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Metcalf and Eddy, as you see in that chart, typical MEC design guidelines in Metcalf and Eddy. So MEC design guidelines are the guidelines and design criteria that the ministry uses to develop and wastewater treatment facilities. Metcalf and Eddy are a very well reputable company and group within the water and wastewater industry, and they actually develop design guidelines as well that the ministry utilizes from time to time too. They're sort of the go-to engineers for any design criteria. They're like the expert in the industry. It's a well-known standard as well. Hopefully that answers your question. It's a little broken, but they're the experts in the industry.
Thank you. No follow-on. Okay, are there any other questions? Seeing none, then the motion before us is that the presentation by our Manager of Water and Wastewater Operations regarding the Ilderton and KOMOKA wastewater treatment plants be received. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Scott, Councillor Silva, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Very well. Moving on to the adoption of the minutes. We have a resolution before us, so there are no errors or exceptions, and the motion is that the minutes of the August 12th, 2020 emergency council meeting be approved without errors or omissions. Mover seconder, Councillor Heffernan and Councillor Silva, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving to the consent agenda, we have 11 items here today.